Okay, so you get this threatening notice from the IRS, that says you owe a bunch of money, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars, known as the CP2000 letter. So what the hell is this letter? And today I'm going to be talking about what it is, how the IRS determines these numbers, and what you can do about it. So basically, what is this letter? This letter actually is just the IRS disagreeing with what you reported on your tax return. And typically, when the IRS sends you a notice like this, it doesn't disagree in your favor. It disagrees in their favor. Usually that comes from when they think that you underreported income, or maybe you forgot to report a type of income on your tax return, or left something off, and they have different information in their database. So they're just sending you a notice basically saying, hey, this is what we show versus this is what you reported. And so we think that you're going to owe this much taxes plus penalties plus interest. Usually these letters are 2 to 3 years behind. So right now it's in 2024. You might be receiving notices from 22 or 23. Usually they're quite a bit behind. So if you think you're in the clear, if you purposely didn't report income or accidentally didn't report income, and then you remembered later on and you think you're in the clear, just wait a bit, because the IRS usually takes a bit for these letters to come out. How does the IRS know about what you missed, what you forgot to report, or what you underreported? How do they really know that? Basically, when you get issued a tax document like a W-2 or a 1099, obviously from your employer or from a brokerage firm or something, you get a copy of that 1099 or W-2. That's basic knowledge, right? That's how you kind of know what to report on your tax return. However, the reporting agency or the reporting entity also reports that same copy to the IRS. So the IRS knows what you made on your W-2, how much taxes were withheld, and all that. So when you file your taxes and you report that same information, they match it up to make sure it matches. Same thing with investment brokerages who report your stock sales on a 1099-B, or your independent contracting employer who reported your income on a 1099 NEC. Usually they report the same copy to the IRS as well. Now there's a lot of these forms that you may get, W-2, 1099 NEC, 1099K if you're a business owner and accept credit cards and electronic payments, 1099Rs if you took distributions from a retirement account. All these things get reported to the IRS. So basically, you can see now that if it gets reported to the IRS and you forgot to report it on your tax return, the IRS will know about it. Okay? Now, there's no leeway here. If you forgot about something and you honest to God, made a mistake to report it, there's no penalty forgiveness or tax forgiveness here. Okay? It's truly your responsibility to know what to report on your income tax return. So if you forgot to report something and the IRS knows about it, they're going to send you this notice plus with an amount due plus penalties and interest. And saying that you forgot is not a valid reason to waive the penalties and interest. So what are most common problems for receiving this notice? Really, it's usually, from my experience, is when people just simply forget to put something on their tax return, an income item on their tax return. That's the most common problem. The second most common problem is if they didn't, even though they didn't forget to report it, they reported the incorrect amount, or they typoed something on the tax return, so the IRS is going after them. The third most common problem here is maybe somebody didn't know that they were supposed to report it as income, and so they didn't. But the IRS knew about it. And a good example of this is a sale of a house. So typically when you live in your home as a primary residence and you don't conduct any business in your home, usually when you sell your house, there shouldn't be any 1099s reported to the IRS and to you. But sometimes the title company does report it to the IRS, and they're supposed to send you a copy of the 1099-S as well. And for whatever reason, sometimes you may not receive that copy, or maybe you think you didn't receive that copy. But either way, because you thought it was your primary home and you didn't have to report it on your tax return, you just didn't report it. And so the IRS has a copy of this 1099-S that shows that you sold your home, and so they're sending you this notice to tell you, hey, you forgot to report this. Now, let's say we went through all this process, you figured out why you got this notice, and let's say you accept that you forgot to do something that you were supposed to. Let's say that you agree with the IRS that you forgot to report this income on your tax return. Should you just accept the notice and the amount due on the notice and just pay it? And the answer is no. You should not just simply accept what the IRS calculates here. And there's several reasons here. One, even if you forgot something on the tax return, the IRS is trying to extract as much money from you as possible, and usually there's room for you to lower the amount due. Let me give you an example. Let's go back to the sale of the house. Now, when the title company reports the sale of the home to the IRS, it's just going to report the gross sale amount to the IRS. So, let's say you sold your house for $500,000, and for some reason the title company reports that to the IRS, and you forgot to report it on your tax return. Well, that $500,000 gross sales amount is what the IRS sees as income, when in reality, that whole thing is not income, most likely. Most likely you bought the house for maybe like $450,000 or something, and then you sold it for $500,000. And so you at least have a net margin of just $50,000. And, I'm not going to get into this now. If you lived in the house for more than 2 years, you don't even have to owe any taxes on that either, right? So just because you agree that you forgot to report something on the tax return doesn't mean that you should just accept what the IRS calculates. Let me give you another example here. If you forgot to report independent contractor income on your tax return, so you got a 1099 NEC and you forgot to report on your return, but the IRS sends you this notice to rectify the situation, and you say, yep, yeah, I actually made some self-employed income here and I forgot to report it, so I'm just going to pay it. Don't do that, because usually when you have independent contractor income, there are expenses that you can deduct against that income to lower that net income. So what I'm trying to get here is, even though you agree that you forgot something on the tax return, don't just go and accept what the IRS proposes. Another example of this are stock sales. So if you forget to report, sales of stocks on your tax return, let's say you have a brokerage account from a long time ago that you just liquidated, like at the beginning of the year, and just completely forgot about it, right? That happens. I've seen that happen a lot. And because you've had it for a long time, you don't know, the IRS doesn't know what the stock basis of your holdings are. So again, just like the house situation, the IRS just knows your gross proceeds, and it doesn't consider your stock basis, which is essentially what you bought the stock for. So really, your income should only be your proceeds minus your basis. But since the IRS may not know what your basis is, they're just going to say that you owe the entire gross proceeds as income. You see what I mean? So these are just some examples here that show, even though you might owe money to the IRS, there's a chance that you might owe less or significantly less. So what I recommend here is, if you receive one of these notices, get in touch with a professional and make sure you have a copy of the tax return in question and the documents in question, so that they can hash it out for you. And maybe they might need to talk to you about the situation, like why you forgot to report it, or there might be sometimes, in some cases, duplicate income reportings that the IRS thinks is just two separate incomes, but they're actually duplicates. That's happened before too. So really just talk with a tax professional to see what you can do to mitigate this. Now, how do you prevent this from happening? Basically, really, like I said in the beginning, any sources of income or any income that's reported to you or that you earned during the year, it's your responsibility to report it on the tax return. And that includes income that does not get reported on a 1099 or W-2 or whatever. Like if you own your own business and you sell a widget, and maybe sometimes you sell via Venmo or via cash, you technically still should report that income on your tax return, because if you don't, that's called tax evasion and tax fraud. So just remember, it's your responsibility to report all income that you earn throughout the year. So really just dig through all the current accounts that you have, like stock brokerage accounts, retirement accounts. If you sold a home, just do your due diligence here when you're preparing your taxes, or when you're preparing documents for your tax preparer. to make sure you get everything that you can think of. Now, another way to prevent and minimize penalties and interest is to make sure to amend your tax return before you receive the CP2000 notice if at some point you remember that you forgot to report something. You know, like let's say you file your tax return, maybe a few months later you remember, oh crap, I forgot to report this huge retirement distribution that I took. It would be my advice to amend your return as soon as possible to report that and then pay any additional taxes owed, if any, so that you minimize interest and penalties. Because like I said, the IRS takes 2 to 3 years to get these notices out to you. And so that's 2 to 3 years of interest and penalties accruing on any unpaid taxes that you owe. So just try to rectify the problem as soon as you remember or become aware of it. All right, that's all I got for today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
They act like they know. Guess I gotta hit them with the update. Okay. I been getting to it when I'm up late. Hit it when you at the front gate. They act like they know. Hold up. Guess I gotta hit them with the update. Really with it, I ain't got a pump fake. Killer flow and hit them with the one take. Act like they know. Guess I gotta hit them with the update. Okay. I been getting to